Okay, mute off. Yes. You guys can see my slides. Yes, we're going this morning. Thank you for being here with us today. My name is Megan Smith. I'm with Communities for Youth, and I'm also an associate professor at Boise State University at our brand new School of Public and Population Health. I don't know, Janelle, do you want to?
Yeah, hi, I'm Janelle Stauffer. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I am a therapist at and owner of the Resiliency Center of Idaho, where we specialize in stress, trauma, and attachment, including collective trauma. I'm happy to be here today and to be presenting with the amazing Megan Smith.
That's nice. I feel the same way about you, Janelle. All right. So today, if you've been along this journey with us at this Echo, we appreciate you. We've given you a lot of foundational stuff. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into some risk and protective factors. And our hope is not only to sort of elucidate what those things are, but also to help give you practical school usable tools for those things. And obviously, we could talk about so many risk and protective factors. And Janelle and I, because of the short time window, are only able to do a deep dive into a few. And so we really, if you are excited about pursuing some other risk and protective factor that hasn't been covered today in your assignment this week, we encourage you. You are not narrowed to this, and Janelle and I can kind of weigh in on those additional risk and protective factors as you see them. But thanks so much for being here today. Next slide. Okay, so today the goal is to explain the impact of risk and protective factors on student well-being, which we have already started that conversation. Identify the key risk and protective factors that are important to Idaho students. So again, part of what Communities for Youth does is the Idaho Youth Well-Being Survey. So we are in lots of schools across the state. And so we can kind of think about what are those key risk and protective factors that we're seeing come up in many communities throughout our state. And that is where Janelle and I will kind of focus our conversation today. And then we hope that you'll be able to apply some of the research on these risk and protective factors to tangible actions you and your school can take. And again, our whole goal at Communities for Youth and with this Echo is not to give you more stuff your poor school has to do, but rather to give some ideas that hopefully fit into what you are already doing. Little tweaks and changes, little paradigm shifts, nothing like over and above that you need to know everything about. And so that is our goal today with you. So thanks for being here. We just wanted to present the health impact period kind of undergo a lot of our work. The goal is to promote the most well-being for the most people. And we often think about the top of this pyramid, and the top of this pyramid is very important. It is very important at the individual level to make sure that individuals who are struggling have what they need. As we go deeper through this pyramid, we're actually impacting more and more of the population. So the idea behind an upstream prevention approach, where we're trying to think through what are the kind of underlying factors that show up in an individual's challenges, is when we're getting deeper into that pyramid. So again, our goal is to promote the most well-being for the most people, and in our schools, that is the most students, right? And obviously teachers and staff as well. So just, I know we've already seen this slide, but just kind of honing us in on upstream prevention. This is when we work on root causes instead of waiting for something horrible to happen and then running towards it, because that is, y'all, it's burning us all out. And so let's figure out how we can just build a stronger system so that we are ourselves more able to readily adapt and move towards it and support young people. And so our kids are doing better too. Addressing mental health, as we all know, is going to take more than clinicians or speakers or programs. It's going to take us thinking about the problem as a holistic thing and how we can all move together to work for it. And we can, this is the good news, y'all, we can co-create schools high in protective factors and low in risk factors. And one of the things that I hope you take from each kind of lesson throughout the ECHO project this year is that these protective factors or these positive life experiences really are so powerful. They're so powerful that they come over and above the challenges that our young people are going to face. So I know sometimes when we see the kids that are struggling in so many elements of their life, it really feels kind of overwhelming, and it feels like, what could we possibly do to help this kid? And even if you are doing so good at just one protective factor for that kid or one really positive relationship or positive experience, that is powerful, even if you can't make a change across that whole young person's challenges. And so we really, from an upstream prevention frame, really want to think about what are those protective factors we can lean into that feel resonant with us, that are capable, that we're feasible and can do. And so that's where we start the conversation today. These are the key risk and protective factors. As Adam may have said, I don't remember if everyone was on the call when he said this, but data for Idaho is hot off the presses, y'all. We are in the mode because in late October, early November is when most of our schools survey across the state. And so this data is really hot off the presses. You are some of the first people who are going to see this. These are the top 5 risk and protective factors as they relate to our youth well-being in the state. And what we think of as those well-being outcomes right now are really depression and suicidal ideation, as we are focused on that mental health and well-being of our young people in Idaho, as that is across the state. When we ask schools or hospitals or parents, they all say behavioral health is our #1 concern. And so that is why those outcomes are a focus for the Idaho Youth Well-Being Survey right now. And the #1 factor across all of our areas is really ending up being this social connection. And so we're going to unpack that today for you, followed by stress. We are so lucky to have Janelle here because she is an expert on these things and really can bring in the stress and discrimination conversation. We're going to talk about sleep with you all today. And then our other factor is family support. We're not going to cover that today because of time, and we feel like that's one that we all know is important, but is a bit more out of the wheelhouse of schools. And so we're going to leave that and hopefully catch it up at some other time. So we'll be focusing today with you on social connection, stress, sleep, and discrimination and violence experiences. So we're really excited for you to be here with us today. The first protective factor we're going to talk about is sleep. And we know all of us probably at some point in time were told sleep was important for us. But what we are learning, even in the last 5-10 years of research, is just how important and how empirically traceable the importance of sleep is. And so as we expand our knowledge about sleep, this is just a quick little chart. It's not mine. I wish I made it, but I didn't. But this is a quick little chart on all the different ways sleep impacts us. And you can see that it impacts both our physical and our mental health. So if there's anything that we can think about, again, particularly at the adolescent level, if you're a middle or a high school professional, sleep is so important for young people. And so we talk about sleep as sleep hygiene, right? Just like we would do dental hygiene, brushing, we want to think about what is important for sleep. And so here are the standard, what we know about what is required for sleep. So from 6 to 12-year-olds, so again, this is kind of hitting some of that middle school population, 9 to 12 hours as a minimum requirement. I don't know that any middle school student is really getting this, including my own. Mea culpa. But this is really important. The next age range is 13 to 18. So this is capturing that older middle school student into our high school student. And that minimum is 8 to 10 hours every day consistently. And then once we're adults, we can get 7 or more per 24 hours. And these are just heuristics based on the sleep studies they've done so far in the US. Some quick tips. Consistency is key. So some of us have regular bedtimes, regular wake up times. They say that having that is sometimes even more powerful than the full amount of sleep. So you can think about how you can range that. Obviously, bedroom environments being cool, being dark, being comfy, being things that we don't do other stuff in. So we shouldn't arrange all our homework and work across the bed and work really hard and then clear it all off and think we're ready for sleep. And then also, obviously, removing distractions. So a big thing we're trying to push into our parents and school communities as we have these conversations is, can we create a social norm across our group of humans that we just don't have screens and bedtimes at night? And so do we just leave them on the kitchen counter? And of course, as one individual parent, those of you with teens know, that is extremely hard to pull off. But if we can pull off as a social norm of our whole community, then less kids are going to be like pinging your kid at night because all the screens will be in the kitchen. And so this is just something we're kind of spreading around. Some interesting information that we've collected on sleep is that actually, as young people are aging in Idaho, they are getting less sleep. So this orange percentage is how many young people are not getting the minimum of 8 hours of sleep. And you can see that is a straight up line as we get up through high school. When we did what is driving the lack of sleep in Idaho students, we found that age a relationship you just saw where across grade level kids are getting less and less sleep. Family support, so how much we feel like we have that family support is one of the drivers, and I'll show you in a second what I mean. Stress, which is great that Janelle will be talking about that, impacts sleep, and screen time. And I will tell you, when we collect statistical data, we also go and follow up with young people in conversation. And the conversations, they bring up all of these things, these ideas of running thoughts, these ideas of screens being distracting, of high levels of stress, mostly due to their school life when we talk to them. So this is students reporting depressive symptoms by duration of sleep, and it's a little bit hard to unpack, so I'll do it really quick. The blue bar percentage is representing how many young people in that group reported none to mild depression. And then the yellow bar is how many people reported moderate to severe depression. And the two bars on the left are representing kids who got 7 hours or less of sleep. And you can see that that yellow bar, that group of kids who are clinically relevant depressive symptomology, 51% of kids not getting enough sleep are also scoring in that moderate to severe level of depression. So even I know it's hard to hear like this like vague global sleep is important, but this is in Idaho kids right now. Kids who aren't getting enough sleep are reporting much higher rates of depression symptomology. Here, percentage of students getting 8 hours of sleep by screen time. So you can see that the first bar that you're looking at is less than 2 hours, and 64% of kids are getting enough sleep at that. And then it just goes down from there, right? Kids who are spending 2 to 4 hours on screens are getting only 55% of them are getting enough sleep. And if kids are spending 4 hours or more on screens, only 48% of them are getting enough sleep. So again, just showing that relationship between screen time and sleep. This one is sleep and stress. And so you're seeing two groups. You're seeing on the left a bar that represents kids who are in the low stress category. On the right, you're seeing a group of kids who have high stress. And you can see the difference in how many young people are getting enough sleep there. So just a quick, I know we all have our own ticks and trips and ticks. I can't say it. Establish a nighttime routine, get up and go to sleep at the same time, create a healthy sleep environment, turn off electronics an hour before bed. And really for our young people, that's even more sensitive, but it works for us too. That light that comes off of our screen tricks our body into morning light. So it actually tricks our body into thinking, oh, it's not time to sleep. So that is why it's so important to get off your screen. Reducing stress, I know, easier said than done for all of us. Avoiding large fatty meals prior to sleeping, exercise, and limiting caffeine. If you find yourself really struggling with sleep, especially our kids, I mean, kids shouldn't be having caffeine anyway, but you want to really limit that to maybe just one in the morning. So here's the moment for you all. So this is explore activities to support sleep. And I know there's a lot of words on the screen and there's going to be a lot of information coming your way. But what I wanted to let you know is that this is a slide deck you have. So please, with your school, revisit this, think about it, send us questions. We want to be a useful tool in this work with you. But here are some activities that, again, have been tested out in the world that schools have done in order to increase sleep. Because I know sometimes we think, well, what does a school have to do with what a kid's doing in their bedroom, right? And you're right. But there are things that we can do structurally with school. So one is we can incorporate interactive lesson plans about sleep. Just a little bit about what we were talking about here. What is sleep hygiene? What are those minimum requirements? How can we set ourselves up for success? We can teach students about sleep-related topics, so stress management and organization, and I'm sure some of your schools or U.S. school counselors have curricula already around stress, healthy social media use, these kinds of things. All of that helps support good sleep habits. You can promote homework policies that prioritize quality over quantity, helping our teachers understand what is a necessary homework assignment that absolutely needs to be done and what is something that maybe isn't a necessary thing, but I'm just used to assigning it that way. Given the competing demands of young people, I know it's tough. I have been a classroom teacher. I understand. I was a math teacher, so homework is super important in the math space to keep up those skills. But thinking about what can I give that truly assesses or helps promote their learning, but isn't creating too much burden given the very busy lives our young people lead, especially now with the pressure to participate in so many extracurricular activities. You can coordinate with other teachers. So through teacher teaming and things like that, we can think about if we're all assigning an essay or a big project at the end of the year, how do we change that? How do we spread those out throughout the year? We can consider things like deadlines, due dates, sports, and school schedules in those conversations. We can encourage students to seek support from folks that can help, so school counselors or other professionals in this space, if they're facing stress or mental health or really just struggling with sleep. Sometimes that's the only language a kid has. I can't sleep. And they don't have the language for the other struggles. And so if someone is saying or falling asleep in your class, that's a moment where we could reach out to that student and connect them to help. And then finally, promoting kind of sleep awareness and the importance of sleep. Sleep has come up in Blaine County multiple times for us. And one of the first things we learned that first year where we shared it back with parents is they didn't really know those minimum numbers. So they kind of had 7 hours in their heads. And when you have 7 hours in your head and you think that sleep can be caught up on the weekend, you may not worry about your kid only getting 4 hours during the week because you have those ideas in your head. So really just helping young people and their parents and the larger community and your athletic department folks understand how important sleep is and what those minimum requirements are. All right, we're going to shift into Janelle, and she's going to talk about stress and discrimination.
Yeah, I wanted to add one more comment about sleep real quickly. One thing, everything's so important. Sleep is really the baseline for all mental health. And so I think about it a lot with the people that are coming into our office to find some healing from stress and trauma. And there's one element that I would add to the conversation that Megan had, and that is in adolescence, there's a circadian shift. A natural circadian shift that causes a delay in the way teen brains create melatonin, and they begin to get sleepy later than they did in the developmental stage before. So from about age 12 till the early 20s, there's this shift where tiredness and melatonin creation doesn't really start until after 11 p.m. And since they need the amount of hours of sleep that Megan said, one of the upstream prevention things to consider, which is always, I always get booed when I bring this up to schools because of how hard it is logistically. But one upstream thing to consider is the changing of school start times. There's a lot of data to suggest that this is low-hanging fruit that schools can grab to address something way upstream and increase stress for teens. As it is, we kind of make kids try to go to bed earlier, even though their brains aren't making melatonin, and then wake up to get to school at like 7:30 a.m. for some school districts, the school districts my kiddos went to, which doesn't equate to enough sleep if they're not able to sleep until after 11 p.m. because of their brain. So just something I sprinkle in there. Um, but let's talk about stress and discrimination. We're going to divide this, kind of combine these two into one because they are both forms of stress, but I will be speaking a lot about them individually. Stress is a really important thing to understand because the creation of stress hormones in the brain during important developmental periods like adolescence, which is by many people considered to be the second most important developmental stage of all development. Stress hormones can literally change the architecture of the brain and set people, put them on a path for more risk if it's not taken care of. So, this is an important conversation. A good definition of stress is the response or what occurs when the demands placed on an individual exceeds the resources that they have to cope. So if a kiddo has lower resources, maybe risk factors including poverty or health challenges or a history of trauma, and then we add stress onto it, and they don't have enough resources to respond biologically, psychologically to that stress, then that dysregulates the brain and creates almost a traumatic situation within the brain. When an individual has more protective factors, more resources, they're getting enough sleep, for example, they have a strong attachment with primary caregivers and have no stress or have resolved or no trauma or have resolved trauma, for examples, they can tolerate more stress. So this becomes a subjective experience for each kid. Oh, forward. I guess I have to tell you that, right, Megan? Here are some demands that we can consider stress on the system, school climate, what it feels like inside the system, what they perceive within the school system, family responsibilities or family conflict. Social expectations, which we are very well aware, increase significantly for kids and adolescents because it becomes a developmental task to go outward beyond their family and begin meeting expectations outward. Identity-based pressures, it's a developmental task. We talked about this 2 sessions ago. One of the developmental tasks of adolescence is identity. So what does the identity-based pressure put on the individual? Financial or environmental instability, exposure to discrimination or unsafe situation, which we're going to spend a little bit of time with this here in a couple of slides. And for global majority youth, which is a collective term we use for people of African, Asian, Indigenous, Latin American, or mixed heritage backgrounds, code switching for global majority youth is a major stressor. And code switching is a common term used to say that there is a quick change away from authenticity to be accepted because of the color of their skin. That's a major stressor for many people. Good. Yeah, you go forward. Resources, of course, sleep. We consider the sleep the baseline for all mental health and for health. And so that's an incredible protective factor. Emotion regulation skills, the ability to regulate after stress starts coming in, that is a protective factor. Supportive relationships, we're going to be talking about this shortly, so I'll leave that to Megan. Family stability, coping tools, time, rest, or space. Community and belonging, a very important protective factor that sometimes gets overlooked in our individualistic culture. And then access to mental health support. I'm ready for the next one. Yeah, so let's talk about this a little bit. I wanted to make sure to understand some of the symptoms before we go into this slide, some symptoms of stress. When we know adolescents are experiencing too much stress, it comes across usually looking like persistent or recurring feelings of nervousness, anxiety, worry, pressure, and often in response to the things I've already listed. Um, and so what we know from those symptoms is that 20% of middle and high school students surveyed reported high perceived stress, and that's from the Youth Wellbeing Survey in 2025. 7 in 10 10th graders report persistent nervousness, anxiety, or inability to control worrying in the 2021 Idaho Youth Survey. 20% of Idaho 10th graders reported having seriously considered suicide in the past 12 months, and you really can't disconnect stress and suicide. There many times the pathways to suicidal ideation or passive suicidal ideation has to do with stress. 16% had created a suicide plan, 8% had attempted suicide. And Idaho adolescents have a 20.1% prevalence of major depressive episode, higher than the national average. So, what this data points to, and the story that this data tells, is that Idaho students are experiencing high levels of stress. I think we're ready to move to the next one. Let's talk now about the unique stress that is experienced by the global majority. That we call that discrimination stress, sometimes minority stress. Discrimination refers to the unfair treatment, exclusion, or negative assumptions about a young person based on identity. That could be race, ethnicity, gender, sexuality, disability, immigration status. Stress for global majority youth is shaped not only by typical developmental demands, the stuff we got to do to grow in adolescence, which again, it's one of the most sensitive times of development, but also racialized cultural and systemic pressures that white peers are less likely to face. So it's already hard for every adolescent, 100% of adolescents, with the social pressures, with the screen stuff, with the sleep dynamics. And then when you add the global majority, theirs is increased even more. So it is very important to have this specific conversation. They live in a world where identity itself can become a source of stress. And you don't have to go very far or talk to, doesn't take too long to hear stories from youth that are of the global majority to share that 100% of them have experienced this kind of stress at some point in their life. Moving forward. Yeah, exposure to racism, microaggressions, and bias are what these kids report. Stereotyping, such as the model minority, dangerous, defiant, underrepresented representation in staff and curriculum. They might go to school and not see somebody like them through the whole day, or an adult mentor that looks like them. Disparities in discipline practices, usually implicitly. Of course, it's certainly important to mention today immigration-related fears for self or family, and economic inequity and neighborhood under-resourcing. These things create a constant baseline of vigilance that drains the coping resources on the inside. And so for these kids, this becomes chronic stress instead of what we call in my business episodic stress. Episodic stress is moments of stress. Chronic stress is cumulative stress over and over. So for kids in the global majority, that's how stress is experienced because of how the system interacts. I'm ready for the next. Yes, for them, stress is layered across contexts. I think I've covered this well enough, and I'm going to respect time. So go ahead, Megan. Here's some data. System reporting rate or students reporting racism often or very often had 3.5 times higher odds of suicidal thoughts, 3.9 higher odds of attempted suicide. For gender diverse and LGBTQ plus students, those that experience discrimination are 4 times more likely to report persistent sadness or hopelessness, and LGBTQ plus students are 5 times more likely to attempt suicide compared with peers with no discrimination experiences. So we just cannot not have this conversation about these unique humans. Ready for the next one? Some other side effects of this, when they report discrimination, there's a correlation with lower GPA, more absenteeism, lower school connectedness, higher risk of substance use, higher emotional distress and anxiety. Yeah, so it becomes clear we need to have this conversation about all teens, of course, and to understand these unique dynamics of the minority. We also find that for these kids, there's something called the protective factor gap. Um, when stress becomes unmanageable and the demands become greater than the internal resources, then they have less access to culturally responsive mental health support, fewer staff who share their cultural background, weaker representation in the curriculum, environments that are unconsciously designed around whiteness as a default. You can find this easy by Googling a picture of a child and see that primarily white children come up as options. And this is just the truth across all places. So there is a protective factor gap for people of the global majority. Ready for the next? I think we've covered this enough, Megan. So let's go to the next page. So let's talk about how we put some protections around this stress. What I just shared is really heavy, and I appreciate you listening. We really need to have that conversation. We know that increasing school belonging, improving access to sleep, strengthening family school relationships, and making mental health supports visible and accessible within the school system is a protective factor. Next slide, Megan. Here's some activities that And then again, same as Megan, we have a lot of words on this page, so stick with me. And this is available for you to go and reference later. But here's some very tangible things to do. Create predictability in school expectations and schedules. Increase psychological safety, strong relational connections. I can't emphasize enough, and Megan's going to talk about this next, how important relationships are. Cultural responsiveness. So it's not just cultural sensitivity, it's action. Cultural responsiveness. No tolerance for discrimination or bias harm, and build community belonging. Culturally affirming school environments and curriculum are really important. Anti-bias and anti-racist school policies, and a space for identity expression. Strong adult relationships and mentorship are very important, and staff who model regulation skills, another really important practical tool. Next, Megan. Here's some questions school leaders can ask when it comes to stress and discrimination. Where are we unintentionally creating unnecessary stress? A good thing Megan mentioned earlier was homework. In what way is the way we're applying homework increasing unnecessary stress? Could we do this in a different way? Whose stress is invisible in our system? This is a good one to start identifying the global majority or LGBTQ plus. Um, which ones can we not see but is still there? Do global majority students feel seen, valued, and safe in this school, or do they experience daily microaggressions, stereotypes, or exclusions? Do students feel they belong here? How well do we partner with families as protective factors? And are we building environments that regulate or dysregulate? Yeah.
I love that last question. It's helpful even in my own work. How do I build environments that regulate rather than dysregulate? All right, our last protective factor that we're going to do a deep dive on is social connection. For those of you who have heard Communities for Youth around the state, we have started, thanks to Ann Abbott's work, really started really communicating on social connection because, again, it pops in every community we've ever surveyed as one of the top 5 drivers of both depression and suicidal ideation. And I will tell you, although you probably read the news and hear that there's a global loneliness epidemic and there is a US loneliness epidemic, we, and especially our young people in Idaho, are also in that loneliness epidemic. We are feeling isolated, and those young people, by and large, are the ones struggling with depressive symptomology and suicidal ideation. And so what we mean when we say social connection, right? We're flipping it from social isolation and loneliness into the positive, because again, protective factors over and above the challenges in our life can really be powerful. So what we mean is high quality, deep relationships in which we can be our authentic selves. Social connection means we have the quality and quantity of relationships we need. And I just want to recognize that's very subjective, right? We have some people need one human. So I know when we say the word lonely, everyone goes to the lonely kid, right? It's maybe the kid that's quietly reading in every class and in the hallway. That kid may be okay. I'm not saying they definitely are, but they may have the relationship level that we need. Meanwhile, someone running through the hallway high-fiving everyone is maybe not the okay kid, even though we might automatically think it, because that person either doesn't have the quality or the authenticity of the relationships they need or the quantity. And so, again, just kind of pushing on that jump to stereotype we think of when we think of a lonely kid. So just to kind of look at why we say social isolation is driving depression in Idaho students, here's a quick graph. You're seeing 3 groups here. You're seeing a group that was rated low social isolation, so not feeling that loneliness. They do have the quality and quantity of relationships they have. We have a medium group who's scoring 3s across, like kind of neutral on that. And then we have a high social isolation group. These kids across 9 items measuring this loneliness are scoring 5s and high 4s on all of these. And so what you see, that blue, sky blue with the percentage, is how many young people in that group also scored at a moderate to severe level of depression. And so you can see why we focus so much on talking about social isolation and connection across our communities, because you can see a very neat and very strong linear relationship here, where those kids scoring in that high social isolation group 83% of them are also scoring at a moderate to severe level of depression. And so if there's nothing else you and your school focus on, I would say highlight social isolation and connection. What we know about social connection, kind of writ large in the research, is that humans, and we are learning this more and more as we name the loneliness epidemic, we are biologically wired for social connection. So this is not about hopey, fluffy, like, oh, we need friends. No, no. This is about the way that humans survive in this world. So there are biological and neurological mechanisms in each of us that need other humans in our realm. And so this is beyond like, I have friends. This is really at a deep biological, neurological level. Poor or insufficient social connection is associated with a 29% increased risk of heart disease and 32% increased risk of stroke. And it's similar to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And this is where I really move us out of like, we need friends to, whoa, this is deeply impacting us and our health and our ability. And it's increasing our risk for anxiety, depression, and dementia. So if there's nothing else you do for yourself today, go connect with someone, make some eye contact, smile at them. Whatever you need to do to feel that connection. Connection is one of the best protective factors for mental health and concerns like substance use. And so in the substance use field, I started my career in substance use prevention, and we used to say abstinence is not the opposite of addiction, it's connection. Connection is the opposite of addiction, because when we have those connections, we can bring down our mental health challenges and bring down our substance misuse. And so this also, we just heard about stress and discrimination. The social connection can help mitigate and is in fact one of the main protective factors of high levels of stress. So again, going all in on social connection can be really powerful. So pillars of social connection for young people, we have three buckets we like to talk about. We have connection to self, and this is one that I think we forget because again, we think we think of social connection, we always think about connections to other people. But remember that authenticity piece. In order for us to share our authentic self with others, we need to know who we are and feel comfy to share that with other people. And so this can be done through creating opportunities of exploration, opportunities to explore our purpose in life. Who do I want to be in this world? Especially for adolescents, it's important to give them some autonomy in those choices and how they explore those choices, and to help them skills so they can feel competent in doing that. And then some self-awareness. So what are my feelings? Why am I feeling the way I'm feeling? So the more we understand ourselves, and this can be done through quiet practices of journal reflecting or just being bored is super good for you. I don't know if you guys recently saw the New York Times, but boredom actually allows our brains to wire ideas together. And so this is something we need to encourage our young people and ourselves to do, right? We're now so used to filling any moment with noise, whether it be your favorite podcast or scrolling, doom scrolling is my personal favorite, but reminding yourself that that robs you of that boredom, that quiet time, that space to get your brain connecting thoughts and really reflecting on your experiences. The second pillar is connection to peers. And again, we maybe hear this message and we're like, oh, great, we'll just have peers work in pairs more in our class. But it's harder than that. It's about thoughtfully pairing young people together, providing them the scaffolding to really connect and understand how to do that work together collectively. And then the last one is connection to safe, trusted adults. And that is hopefully all of you. Especially for teenagers, being a safe, trusted adult means you're doing more listening than you are relating or advising. And this can be hard, but also once you start practicing it, it can be freedom releasing because now you don't have to solve everything. You just have to be an active listener. Noticing kids can be really powerful for young people. And then also you, just as Janelle already said, role modeling positive coping. So our kids watch a lot of TV, they get a lot of information from the internet, and often the coping strategies there are alcohol or pulling away from other people or doing drugs. And what you can do is we all have negative feelings that we deal with sometimes. So in your classroom, if you're hitting that point of point of exhaustion or frustration, you can kind of model that, name it, and then tell students what you will do. I'm going to get together with my friends after school because I just really need that. Or I'm going to go for a walk, or I'm going to play my favorite soundtrack because that always gets me out of this feeling when I'm feeling it. So again, modeling, yep, we have hard feelings too as adults, and this is how we cope positively can be really powerful for young people learning those skills and being able to connect. There are so many activities here, and we are at time, and I want to leave time for questions. So I'm just going to highlight just a few, really identifying opportunities that you can have young people interact in positive ways. And I know sometimes we feel like connection is this fluffy thing, but it can provide a whole foundation for your classroom going really well. It changes management dynamics in your classroom. It changes performance dynamics in your classroom and at your school level. And so things like having adults welcome young people as they arrive and calling them by name, again, that's not a high lift, but it is a huge change in the way that young people see the way they're treated and thought about in that school building. Creating school and class traditions. So again, these seem over and above or funny or weird, but if you have just a couple of times a year that you guys do something absolutely wacky or fun, those are great for building those types of connection for young people. So lots of activities and ideas on this list. And again, Janelle and I want to be able to give you feedback. So if you have questions about this, just drop them in your assignment and we're happy to respond. There's another, if you're interested in all sorts of activities that schools can do, this is a resource from your dear friend Annie Abbott. This is Healthy Youth Development, and you can go on and actually look for different programs that support positive relationships. And so that's a really cool opportunity for you. The thing that I want to close out with before we go to question and answer, which we do want, is our assignment this week is picking one of the protective factors. Either we discussed today or something else that's a strong protective factor, and describe how your school could increase this and what supports you think you would need in order to be successful. Because again, this is helpful for us as we continue to support schools in this space. If we know what you're kind of focused on protective factor wise and where you need help or support, what types of help and support, then Communities for Youth can really meet that challenge and that need. And so we appreciate you sharing that with us today. So questions and answers, we're so excited, and the panel can't wait to answer your questions.
Janelle and Megan, this was awesome. Thank you so much. You can go ahead and stop your share, and then we can get into Q&A. And so to our audience members, we would love if you guys come off of mute to ask your questions, but you can also put them into the chat. Oh, what is the name of the Annie Abbott site? I love that.
Annie?
It's the social connection. It's our social connection bank, right? Let me find a quick link for it and drop it in.
We should have been prepared. Thank you.
I love having it referred to as the Annie Abbott site.
Good follow-up.
Questions?
More comments, feedback, problems, etc. We just want to hear from y'all today.
I have a question that I wanted to ask. I can kick it off. Janelle, you talked about systems that regulate versus dysregulate in schools, and I'm curious if you can provide any examples of what that would look like, and I don't know if Adam and Jim, you guys have kind of done a deep dive into any of that, but any thoughts?
Yeah, I would love to hear from what they have to say. And yeah, systems that regulate are systems that slow down and look at how are intentional about how processes speed up our nervous system or slow down our nervous system. And you know, our nervous system is dynamic and needs to go both directions, a speed up and a slow down. But one of those would be when you walk into the environment, are there spaces for slowness? Is there a space to sit down? Are there breaks between busy experiences? How fast do people have to transition between things? Are there adequate opportunities for help seeking? Are there opportunities for connecting? Those are the ways I would begin answering it. And I'd love to hear what anyone else on the panel has to say about that.
I think in Blaine County, our schools, it often gets lumped into PBIS, and we look at tier one. And one of the protective factors that was mentioned was predictability. And I think providing predictable expectations, predictable scheduling, all of that reduces anxiety. And when you do have some sort of stress, possible stress inducing event, previewing that ahead of time, talking through what that might look like.
That's so good. Yeah, that's predictability is very important for regulation.
We had a question in the chat from Samantha Johnson who said, wondering if any high schools have implemented a lunch program of any kind to support student connection. How was it facilitated, if so?
Good question.
So we have a couple of schools that have tried spaces in here. One that I think is really fun, based on just some of the data that we've collected around young people, is that it was actually spearheaded by teenagers in one of our districts, and they created a rec league. So many of our young people love sports, but unfortunately, the moment we find ourselves in is if they are not excellent at their sport, they no longer can participate in the sport. And so this rec league was really to kind of hold that gap, to build those connections and to keep kids who just like basketball, but maybe aren't awesome at basketball, able to play. And it was really cool. They created all sorts of based on what the teenagers wanted. So they had like a badminton, if you can believe it or not. They had basketball, they had volleyball, and I just thought it was a really cool solution. Because especially for some of our young kids, like I said, they need that scaffolded connection. We can't just like throw them together and be like, okay, connect. And so this is a way to kind of have a fun way to connect and also to kind of hold that gap of young people who want to continue playing sports but are no longer welcome in our athletics.
Good.
And Megan, didn't we have one school do like a community partnership breakfast? Like it wasn't school lunch, but it was something where they were partnering with like a senior program or a volunteer program to do like breakfast talks or something with people in the community that were at least trying to like there was something where they were like grouping student intentionally versus just letting them sit whenever they want to. And I can't remember if it was just got into talks or people actually did it, but we've certainly had schools think about that. I don't know how much of it's gotten implemented, but definitely if you look at some of the social connection resources around uh, intergenerational loneliness and like intergenerational pairings and helping partnering with, the local assisted living facility or the AARP or Rotary or something like that. I know that's like a pretty focused strategy that they focus a lot in the senior space, and I think there's a lot of opportunity for it as intergenerational as well.
I'll add to that. I know that Twin Falls High School has a No Need to Loan program that they've done for the last 4 years, and they're trying to turn it into a nonprofit. So they've had some success in implementing a lunch program.
Other questions?
We're at Twin
Go ahead.
Falls. Sorry.
Go ahead, Samantha.
How does that system work at Twin Falls? Is it student-led? How do you find the students who are eating alone? So on and so forth.
I have no idea, Samantha. I spoke to a woman at a conference. She's a counselor at Twin Falls High School. I think there's a newspaper article about it I can send you. I think it was initiated by a student, but I'm sure there was a lot of adult involvement. But I can also
We
connect
have
you to that
contact
woman.
with Twin Falls High School, so we can reach out too. But thank you.
Yep, awesome.
Megan is already on top of it, putting that link in the chat. Other questions, comments from panelists or from our audience members who have thoughts about today's session?
I just wanted to share kind of, I feel like I'm the anecdotal story person here representing the parents, but I just had an opportunity. Well, yesterday I was talking to my oldest son who we he did elementary, a little bit of elementary, middle, and high school in a different part of Idaho that we're living now. Very high performing student, had very supportive family at home. And as he and I were chatting about his, like our family time living in this other place,
he expressed to me that, and I knew this, but we kind of were taking a deep dive. He really didn't have close friends. Students, he really had a hard time connecting with kids. We were outsiders moving into a community. He didn't play sports. He was very into chess, very academic. And it was all the teachers that made the connection, like that made the effort to connect with him. And they were very little things that they did. But as a parent, I just want all of you to know that that effort goes a very long way, even for families that are paying attention and doing all of those things. So he just really very much appreciated those teachers that just took a little bit of an extra interest in him that didn't take really hardly any time out of their day.
Thank you for sharing that, Alexis. So true. Any other thoughts, questions that our audience members or panelists have today?
I was just going to say that I'm also really excited to hear what other types of protective factors you'd want to know more about, like how, if this is a protective factor we want to increase in our school, how might we go do this? And if you drop it in the chat, that's great. If you raise it here, that's great. Or if you just put it on your assignment, I think our team is really interested in how can we provide what you need in order to be successful in meeting all these protective factors that y'all are already so good at doing.
I love that. And also, it'd be great to address those in future sessions because we have a whole nother semester. I would love to kind of close it out today with some pearls. So I'm going to put my panelists on the spot here, but just one takeaway that you have from today's talk, and you have 30 seconds or less. So I'm going to start with Megan, and then I'm
I'll
going to
start.
go to Janelle and Alexis, and then the
Okay. I'm just going to say the pearl is really that if you prioritize nothing else, prioritize connection, and that is not for fluffy reasons. It is for academic outcomes. It is for mental health outcomes and well-being. And I promise you, if you prioritize connection with your young people and your teachers, your school will feel better overall.
Okay, my pearl is to have eyes to find the invisible stress.
love that.
I just am reminded that that sleep is such an important part of a student's day, that evening time. And I do know people in other states that have gotten policies passed to change start times, and those schools would never go back to the original time. As a former school board member, it was something we worked on, and I just feel like if people make efforts and help people understand, it's possible. So.
Love that. Jim, Adam, Ann, and then Hannah.
I would echo Megan's comment and just share with the group. Last week we had our community data walk and we were just overwhelmed with how many people came. We had 90 members of the community show up. And then they voted on the top priority, and I was so relieved that they chose community connection as their number one. Because that's something I was dreading that they might say sleep, and there's very little we can do to impact that. So yeah, community connection.
Megan's message about the importance of planned silence time really resonates with me, and it's something I think we all need to be reflective as educators and parents about how important protecting some downtime for kids is.
And Ann and Hannah to close us out.
All right. Yeah, I'm gonna be a broken record about this, but one of the reasons that we focus on social connection so hard at Communities for Youth and we've integrated it into so much of our research programs is because it is awesome both as a protective factor for mental health, teen dating violence, bullying, like all of these things, but it is also a resilience factor that if people wind up experiencing any of those things, they can come back from it better suited to address them and better able to help others. And so my pearl is if you're going to focus in on one thing to prevent a whole host of things and also help with responding to a whole host of things that schools care about, social connection is it. And the research is chef's kiss. So thank you all for listening to my TED Talk, but social connection is it.
I really appreciate being in a space where protective factors are getting as much airtime as risk factors. We talk about risk factors a lot, and I just appreciate the shift toward protective factors and the examples of things we can all do to help boost those.
Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for being here today. We are going to be back on Friday, January 8th or 9th. Sorry, I am lost on my days. Friday, January 9th, with Megan Smith and Adam Johnson. They'll be presenting about the case for robust data collection. I hope you all have a fantastic holiday season with lots of social connectedness. So we will see you again then. Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.